Hello, Spark fans, and thanks for joining me on day one of the Data and AI Summit Europe Edition 2020. So we have just had the opening keynote where we heard from Ali Ghodsi about the Lakehouse vision. We had Reynolds in and Brooke Winning doing the demonstration of SQL Analytics. So this is the brand new, just announced last week, different workspace inside Databricks that is purely geared towards SQL people. Those people. It's purely geared for people who want to be able to write queries interactively in a much nicer SQL experience, build visualizations, build dashboards, connect to BI tools, and do all that stuff. So we're going to take a look into that, and I'll kind of give you a bit of a walkthrough. We've got kind of the preview version of it. You can apply for the preview today, so if you want to have a play, you can go and do that. And yeah, any questions on it, kind of anything you want to look into, let us know. Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of videos from us over the next few weeks as we dig into different parts of it. So if there's elements of it that you're interested in, let us know. And we'll see what we can do to explore and share and do all that normal stuff that we do. Okay, so first things first, yeah, there is a big launch blog and we'll share that. And that talks kind of through the vision, which is really useful. It's really good to understand who Databricks are targeting this at, who this is for. And it talks about, they're aiming to simplify stuff. So there's some things in here. A lot of it is, it's just Databricks. It's just a Spark cluster, but it's wrapped in a layer of abstraction. It's made a lot easier. They've removed a lot of complexity around the Spark UI and cluster configs and all that kind of stuff. It's geared to make it easier for people to adopt. They've said, you know what? Data engineers, data scientists, they can hop on Spark and learn it, and it's fine. But talking to your data analysts, your BI people, your kind of the people who are very used to working in a purely SQL warehouse world, they find it a bit complex. Looking in the Spark UI to say what happened is like, oh, there's a lot of info in there. So it's all about reducing complexity. Talk about Lakehouse, obviously we know that well. Talking about, so there's a few different product things. I'll skip over those because we'll look at that. That's fine. One of the big things is connectivity. So it's connecting to Tableau, to Power BI, to Looker, to Click, all the good enterprise premium BI tools. And that for me is a very important message because when I've spoken to people about Databricks SQL Analytics, they've said, oh, is that instead of Power BI? So I don't need Tableau anymore, I can just use this. And the answer is no. It's an experience for ad hoc exploration. It's very good for people doing SQL. There's no drag and drop data modeling editor. It's not going to be a semantic model with DAX and all things like your Power BI. It's no replacement for a premium enterprise power, like a BI tool. Power BI tool. Sure, Microsoft. But it is a really nice, simple, easily accessible dashboarding tool. So if you don't have all the big premium reporting dashboarding requirements, it's awesome. If you do have those, it's a new endpoint that you can connect your BI tools to that simplifies things and has a ton of optimizations in there. So it's kind of for both people. Whether you are in Tableau, BI, Click, that kind of thing currently, there's stuff there for you. Whether you don't have that and you're like, do I need to buy another BI tool? You can use this as a entry-level BI tool, but it also has a load of other stuff in there. So that is great. And one of the things I've got to say, we are super honored at Advancing Analytics because we are one of the launch partners. So we are one of the consulting partners for SQL Analytics. So, if you're figuring out how to build a lake, you're trying to figure out how to build a lake house with Databricks and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, come and talk to us. It's really cool. And there's a lot of stuff about performance. Performance is a big thing because they've got the Photon engine in there. And the Photon engine, we heard about that with the release of Spark 3. And like the last summit, there's lots of information. We got to hear about the vectorization and the folding up of data passed to the CPU in their new C++ engine. That's Photon. And this is the first glimpse of it. It's baked into SQL Analytics as its first area. So really cool. And there's some history and administration and that kind of stuff. So we'll have a look at those bits. Basically, there's loads of new stuff, all to do with SQL. So what is it? Well, it's got Databricks here, right? So I've got my Databricks portal, and it's nowhere in here. I've got this cheeky little thing down in the corner, which is Switch Workspace. So you've now got this concept. You've got the data science and engineering workspace, aka normal Databricks, or you've got the SQL Analytics Workspace. So clicking on that will open up an entirely separate, you get the little Redash logo, we know what this is based on. So it's an entirely separate workspace. And so people can just come directly here. You can give people the link to SQL Analytics and they'll just come here and work in this space and be none the wiser about all the Python-y, Scala-y, R stuff happening across the fence. So it is kind of deliberately creating a segregation going, don't worry about the other complexity. We're not going to give you a load of extra buttons to click on. Here's a real simple, accessible workspace for doing SQL style analytics. So that is in here, and that is where we are. So there's a few things in here. Mainly quick tour down the side. Got dashboards, and they're kind of similar to the old school dashboard. So it's kind of just essentially lots of different visualizations and bits of markdown and various things just tagged and assembled into kind of a nice, easy to use dashboard of visualizations. Queries, this is little snippets of SQL. So each bit of SQL query that I write that produces a data set is a query. So I'm building up assets of, here's a query that produces that visual, here's a query that produces that visual. So it's less of like a massive data model I use for lots of things. It's SQL queries upon which I build visualizations. Again, we'll have a look. Got things called endpoints. Now, endpoints are essentially clusters, but it's clusters made super easy. Don't worry about drivers and workers, the number of workers and sizing or any of that. It is literally, I would like an endpoint. This is a t-shirt size for what it should be. Hit go, start using it. It's really, really trying to make that stuff simple and accessible. Got history and alerts, which are new based on queries. And it's all about that regular scheduling, the refresh of data, did something go wrong? I want some metrics. I want to send me an email if I'm outside a threshold for reporting, and good BI style things. So let's have a look through some of those bits and pieces. Starting off endpoints. So I need an endpoint to be running. I've got a few different endpoints. Again, these are for my different groups of users. I can kind of say this is what you should be coming and doing. And you can see I've got a BI endpoint currently working. Now, I've been using Databricks for so long, it kind of hurts me calling it an endpoint because it's just a cluster. Just a cluster under the hood. I know why they've divorced it from cluster, and we'll talk about that in a second. So it's running, and that's key. So similar to clusters, this cluster has to be turned on, turned off, all of that stuff. I need to spin it up if it's turned off, and it still takes a couple of minutes to turn on. It's the same as all that running a normal Spark cluster because it is a Spark cluster under the hood. I give it a name, it gets an ID. The cluster size, again, that is t-shirt sizing. So if I go edit, I get kind of a drop down of things. And you can see the DBUs, so we can kind of link that back to how we think about clusters in the Databricks world. So my XX small, that's kind of like, your most basic. I just got a driver and I got two real small workers paying about 4 DBUs. That kind of makes sense. And then as you go up, you're talking about, it's going to have more RAM, it's going to have more CPU, you're going to have more workers in there to distribute across, but you don't really see any of that. That's kind of like don't worry about it, we'll take care of that. Made it a lot more black box, a lot more kind of just don't look behind the curtain. Auto stop, as again, we always love it. They should stop paying for it if no one's using it. We can adjust that, I think default's 120. And then there's 2 experimental features. Now, multi-cluster load balancing isn't available yet. So you currently can't turn that on unless you speak to Databricks and the engineers flick a switch for you. And that is to do with, whereas in normal clusters, we have auto scaling of the workers. So I've got one driver and I've got like 2 workers, 10 workers, and it can scale up to 80, 100. And it'll dynamically change the size of that cluster depending on workload. This is different. This is saying, actually, I'm just going to make another cluster or 3 more clusters. And then your endpoint, your SQL endpoint, will just use whichever cluster is free. So it's load balancing across multiple clusters. And that gets over some of the things with a high concurrency cluster. You're still going through the driver. The driver still is the point that's having to manage all your work. So even if you scale out the workers, you can still reach a concurrency maximum because your driver isn't changing size in normal Databricks. Now here we're saying, you know what? We can just keep adding like cookie cutter stamped new clusters into this. We still have the same endpoint, and so we don't have to point to any different locations with our BI tools, and we can scale out concurrency a lot better. So multi-cluster load balancing is super interesting for servicing large numbers of users all writing queries at once without having to invest in a massive driver that for most of the time will be at like 10% capacity. So super interesting, not available yet, unless you've got a use case and you speak to the engineering guys, but super, super interesting. Now, Photon is the new engine. It is the C++ based engine, and we can click that button. We can go, enable it. And it is still very experimental. Kind of put a big, beware, this might occasionally break. So again, not for production workloads yet, but you can have a play. And I've not done the kind of the real, what difference does this make? Let's do some testing with some different combinations. Let's see what kind of query this really, really makes go faster. I've not done that yet. So the plan is to do it. I'll be doing some videos on it over the next few weeks, but for now, there isn't much to it. And that's it. There's a bit of security. That is entirely everything we can do with our cluster. So forget all the Spark init scripts, forget all our advanced settings, forget the low-level tweaking of various different parts of the cluster. It's I would like a small cluster, please, and then done. It's up and running, and that's it. Now, we still get our JDBC endpoint connection, so we still got the stuff so we can connect to it and use it as an endpoint for our tools. And we can do some monitoring. We can see how busy this cluster is. Again, no Spark UI of just tons and tons of information and ganglia and all that stuff. Just how busy it, what's running, what's queued. Just real, trying to make it simple and accessible. So we'll get endpoints. Endpoints allow us, it's our viewpoint into the world. I've got my endpoint running. I can run some queries. And this is the hook. This is the nice thing for all of the SQL-y people, in that I can go in and I've got a query here. I can edit my query and it's just SQL. So it's just a nice space to be writing SQL. Let's do a new query so we can demo that. Okay, so I've got my new query. This is I'm going to call it a test query. Took me a moment to actually see where that little naming button was, but again, that's where you set what things are called. And then I can write a query. So over on the side, this is Hive. So anything in normal Databricks that I've registered with Hive, I will see inside my SQL Analytics cluster. So over here, we're not creating new tables so much. We might create views, maybe. We're not going off and reading the lake and registering new tables over kind of, we're not creating delta tables and that kind of stuff here generally. This is normally our querying layer. So we might, in normal Databricks, in the data science and engineering workspace, do a load of stuff, bring a load of data in, transform it, get it ready, register those tables with Hive. And then at that point, I can come over here and they're available for my analyst users to query. So I've got my sales LT database, I've got a load of tables in there, and then I've got a nice explorer. Finally, I can actually just visually see a list of columns and tables whilst I'm writing a query. Because we used to have like the describe functions and that kind of stuff in normal Databricks and normal Spark. So I could do show tables. I can then do describe table and I can get to it. But trying to write some SQL and then having to stop and go, what was that column called? Go off, check it, run a query, come back, and it's just painful. We've got type down. So it's typing down as we go. And if I do, so I'm going to say from, and then I've got sales LT, get my list of tables in there, say product. Great. Yeah, it's just straight type down SQL. I could say, no, what was the thing I wanted? I wanted my, my name, my product number. You still come in and they'll add them in for me. It's building out a query for me. A lot of the stuff, again, this isn't mind blowing. If you're coming from a SQL perspective, you're coming from a SQL background, and you're used to using Management Studio, Azure Data Studio, all the kind of normal SQL IDEs, this is just like the minimum acceptable level of SQL. But the important thing is we didn't have this before. So previously I'd introduced like people from that background into Databricks going, look at all the stuff you can do, it's amazing. And they go, it doesn't even do autocomplete. It doesn't type down SQL on it. And it's just a real barrier to stop people adopting it. So all of this stuff coming in is just making that a real acceptable environment for people coming in to do it. Now, it's not yet finished. So this is still preview. There's still stuff happening, so I can still do the one thing that grates me. So, I can alias things and that works. But then the type down, when I do p dot, it doesn't type down for an alias yet. It will, it'll get there. There's a few little niggles and quirks in there, but it's still just a much nicer environment for doing your querying, for working in a SQL kind of way. And there's lots and lots of stuff in here. Okay. So I've got a data set. So I've written a query, I've hit execute, that executed it on my business intelligence cluster. Okay, I can go and see various bits, I can download it, can do stuff. That's nice. So I can do that. So I've got the cluster it's running on, which is a pool, which of my various databases am I using, which table am I exploring. I can do like sort of filtering my tables, which is quite nice. So I can just say, just only show me the things that are like this. Great. And then when I've ran that, I've got my results back. Now, a few little bits and pieces. I can do parameters. I'll do a separate video on how you get parameters and widgets and all that kind of stuff working, but you can parameterize the queries, which is great. Got a formatter, so I can just go, I just make my SQL good. I don't need to worry about how I write it. I just could smash SQL in and then hit go and it'll tidy it up. And I can turn autocomplete on and off. Currently doing a limit to 1,000 stuff. Most importantly, the majority of times when we're in here, we're writing the query, we get some results back, and we go, I need to visualize that. I need to do a thing. So let's just do I'm going to make it, query won't make any sense, but just so we have some data in there, I'm going to pop a group by in there. There we go. I'm going to format it again because I wrote badly. There we go. Okay, so I'll have something that I can just put a quick visual over. And I can say add visualization. And I get this whole visualization pop-up. Now, off the top, I've got a chart. I would like a chart, please. And actually, this gives you a lot of the same options that we had in a normal Databricks notebook. So if you've got visualizations that you normally use in there that you quite like, you've got a lot of the same options. And then we have a whole ton of other more advanced visualizations baked in. And some of them are fantastic. So being able to do things like funnel views are actually sort of quite cool. I don't know if I've got this is not at all the right shape of data, but it's that kind of thing where you see data going down and down and down, and you get to understand how things are stepping between stuff. We can do things like cohorts and relationships. We can do like all the mapping stuff is great. Sankey, I love me a Sankey diagram, which is when you've got it's like the Google Analytics kind of, this is the number of people that landed on your page, this many dropped out, this many went to the next page, and it's kind of like of all these people, how did they go on a journey? That just comes out with so many different useful things. I can do a sunburst, basically a pie chart with more bits to it that's kind of spanning out. You can do a word cloud, just interesting stuff that actually comes up fairly regularly. Now, when you're happy with that, when you're like, okay, I like that visualization, you've got this add to dashboard button. So I can say I want to take that, I want to add it to a dashboard. That's where we have our dashboard. So let's go over here. Now I've got a dashboard already set up. So we can click in, see a dashboard, and there's just some stuff. So you can see I've got a map, got a word cloud, various things, all AdventureWorks data, SQL, we had to use AdventureWorks. And there's bits and pieces in here. So firstly, I can just hit refresh. And that'll go off, and it'll run each of those saved queries. And again, if it's a few visualizations off one saved query, it'll run the query once and then update the visit. It won't do it per viz. Just doing some interesting stuff in there. I've got this, I've got an image. And that's just based on Markdown. So I can just have a little bit of Markdown, the same Markdown that we use in a Databricks notebook. Again, I've just lifted and shifted that from one of our training courses. I went, I've grabbed that image and pop it in. So any kind of Markdown kind of stuff you can put in there, and then you can have that inside your stuff. We can set a refresh. So I've just hit refresh manually, but I can say refresh every hour. And that'll just automatically trigger a refresh. It'll turn the endpoint on if it's not already turned on, refresh my dashboard and turn off. Now, kind of interesting. The most interesting thing is that means I can access my dashboard when it's not turned on. So I can have this just running on a regular basis, just run every night, and then users log in, look at the dashboard, kind of explore the cached data in the dashboard without having to refresh that cluster. It doesn't need the cluster turned on. So you can do a kind of turn a thing on, update all of my reports, turn my thing off, and that's a super cheap way of just exposing a load of data. And then there's lots of things we can do in here. We've got normal highlighting, we can go and visualize stuff, we can drill down, we can do lots and lots of things. Again, we'll talk more about that kind of stuff probably in future videos, but it's quite nice. It's quite good. Okay, so I've been running some queries. So I've got my history, and I can see in here just this rundown of here are all the different queries that people have been running recently and how long they took. And that one took 30 seconds. Why did that take so long? And you can drill in, you can see the SQL that they ran, you can see who did it, you can dig in and say, please, you can show me the details, and you can get the kind of the SQL catalyst breakdown of actually what went on inside that query, so you can understand why that was such a terrible query to run. Quite a lot of detail, but again, this high-level admin of this is the SQL queries people have been running hasn't really been available. It's quite hard to see that in the Spark UI. There's not this kind of an obvious place to go and say, show me the longest running queries, which we can now do that. We can go and query it. We can filter it down. We can say, why did that one break? So this one had an error. It's because this guy, Simon, he can't write a query and he just kind of put the wrong ID in. That's fine. That's not our problem. That's just a little user error. Maybe we'll reach out to them and teach them how to actually write SQL. Normal stuff. And again, not mind-blowing. Plenty and plenty of other tools have this kind of thing. It's just something that was missing inside Databricks that makes it that much more acceptable to be using in that kind of warehousing style of working. So final thing, if I was running my product sales query and I was running it on a regular basis, so let's write down in the bottom down here, I've got this refresh schedule. So I can say, again, I want you to run every day, that's fine. So run every day, what time, never end, keep going, thanks. That's just now going to run on a regular cadence. Now, that's kind of fire and forget. I just don't need to think about that now. That's just running. But if I ever actually wanted it to tell me about something, I can come in here and say, just have an alert. I want to have an alert on this query that's got a regular refresh, and it needs to be a regular refreshing thing for you to set an alert on it. Otherwise, it'd never see anything. Trigger when I need to pick a column value. Some weird column values in that one. Maybe let's choose a different one. No, it's fine. Okay, and when it's greater or less than, so if it's less than 10. So I want to have at least 10 records coming through here. I want to have like that value less than 10 summed up. How often should it tell me? So if it runs every day, the first time it gets that, should it tell me? And then if it keeps going, it's not going to tell me every time because it's told me once. Or should it tell me every time and be constantly poking me going, Simon, you need to fix this. Please fix this. So some data-based threshold validation alerting. It's great. And we can decide, what does that alert look like? What does the email look like? Does it need to be in a certain thing? Do I need to put in certain, you could actually, because you can edit that and you can have expression built, you can have it so it's maybe kind of raising an issue in your support queue. It's sending an email to your support team going, this is a validation, can you look at that, please? And it can automatically be tagged with the references you need to get in the right bucket. Lots of different things we can do in there. And we can create an alert. So who should it go to? So one of my users, I've only got one user in here, should go to me, trigger when this condition's met. And there we go. I've got an alert. So super, super interesting little useful bits and pieces. So there's a lot of stuff in there. And obviously that is just like a super whistle-stop high-level tour over all of this stuff. Essentially, we have this new environment that is all geared towards people writing SQL queries and exploring the data through SQL. It exposes the Hive data, and so it's all assumes that you're using Hive to have your databases, to have your tables, to expose that and explore that. And you can secure, obviously, your Hive tables using normal table access control security stuff. It allows you to build queries and then build multiple visuals on top of those queries using that nice new SQL editor, and then save visualizations from that into different configurations of dashboards, which can have their own refresh schedule set. Gives you a history of exploring the different queries that run out and the performance and all of those things, and it gives you the ability to set alerts saying, notify me if one of my queries bring back result sets that meet these criteria, in which case I can then do something about it. And yeah, interesting stuff. And it's going to be interesting as it matures. And as we see more with the Photon engine, as we see maybe more visualizations, different things coming through. One of the things that's definitely missing from me, if you're trying to push it as a real dashboarding tool, which they're not, to be honest, they're pushing it as a SQL analytical environment. If they're going to go more down the dashboarding route, you need to have things like cross-filtering and validation of your different charts. Drill on that one, it should filter those themes, colors. I want to be able to say, well, advanced analytics, I want to have it in my themes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a few bits and pieces that kind of are missing to be like a premium BI tool. But again, that's not what they're gunning for. And again, having those endpoints, and especially when the multi-cluster load balancing comes in, its ability to be the endpoint for thousands of users in Tableau, Power BI, Click environments, all that kind of stuff, all serviced from here, is actually much, much better than it's ever been, which again just ties into that whole lake house approach. So if you're saying, I want to have a lake that is managed and governed and has a ton of useful stuff in there, and I want to use this to serve my analytics to the rest of the business, these are all the features that we're missing. So Delta enables us to do a ton of stuff in just having these data models, in being able to query this kind of thing, but then connecting into it and using Hive, it was okay. And all of these features, all of this direction is going to make that story stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. Again, the journey's not over. There's plenty more that can be done, plenty more that we'll see in terms of that evolution. It's just the actual direction that they're going and the stuff that they're putting into it is heading in the right direction for me if we're talking about analytics. If we're talking about people doing SQL, we're talking about people trying to explore the data that you've stored in your lake, these are all fantastic tools that line up for it. So yeah, that's the end of my little tour of the new Databricks SQL Analytics environment. Again, let me know if you've got any questions. Let me know if there's any areas that you want to dig into. I'll probably be doing some spotlights on some of those different, more interesting advanced visualizations, but how you need to shape your data to get it to work, the features in there, how you use them, all of that good stuff. But just let me know if there's things that you guys would like to know. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Data AI Summit, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Cheers.